Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, Vanessa back on Card Fight Vanguard deck profiles. So if you don't like, comment, subscribe, and watch hobby. This time we're covering Keter Sanctuary Set 10 Hexaorb Aquamarine. So we all know when Solarius came out, or Solarion came out, we all thought it was Hexaorb V2, Electric Boogaloo, the new, the better, the best Hexaorb. Well, then Bushy 2 weeks later revealed Hexaorb Aquamarine, and we were like, huh. We may have misjudged the situation. And then we all had hope new Eugene was going to come out. And then Eugene proceeded to get one double rare of support, and that was it. Which is fair. They got outshined by Gambita. Do I feel happy about that? No. But is that just how it works? Yes. So, you know, covering Hexaorb Aquamarine, the deck feels solid, honestly. I love Aquamarine. I think it's what Hexaorb wanted and needed, and it adds a little bit of flair to having additional quote-unquote grade 3s to the deck. So I was going to the start of Shower, and we can kind of see what I mean by that. First today, we have our starter and Tri-Connect Sorceress. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base. On a road opponent, if you win second, draw a card. Standard starter, nuts about it is just a free draw if you win second. None of the ride line really requires this, so you can choose not to run this if you don't want to, but might as well go for the theme of full-on Sorceress and just run this in the ride deck. One of Tier Square, or Tier Connect. Tri-Connect. I'm getting all the cards confused. Then we have Over Trigger and Light Dragon Deity of Honors Amartinoa. Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k power. Over Trigger, you may have one Over Trigger in your deck. Remember, if there's a trigger melee card, draw a card, choose when you reach, get +1 melee for the until end of turn. And if you build a during draft check, activate it to just until end of turn. You can also perform draft checks for the battles your rear guards attack. So, this card alone is stupid. Because while Aquamarine is restricted to your drive check for her abilities to go off, her first ability, or her third ability anyways to go off, her middle ability to proc off trigger effects benefit from anyone's drive checks. So does a very specific grade 3 in this deck. Amartinoa can technically cause loops of attacks, which is great. It's a good ability, which is why I hated the fact that I could never drive check it, and yet the second I added Aquamarine, I've seen this over trigger more times than I've seen it in any other time I played Hexa, or in Keter in general. I think Amartinoa is either liking Aquamarine more, or he is finally realizing that I have threatened him by taking him out of every Keter deck that isn't Hexaorb, and is now choosing to be on my side. Either way, I like the fact that he's finally showing up. So one of Amartinoa in the ride deck, one in the main deck, because, you know, getting rearguard drive checks is powerful, especially in a deck that procs off triggers. Then we have 2 draw triggers in Protection Magic Pro B, grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 4k base, continuous guard, so every opponent's Vanguard to grade 3 guards, 10k or 5k shield, so 10k base shield, which is pretty great, and on top of that, it can increase your hand with guarding power, which is also pretty great, so you know you can do rush, and that's something else I like about Hexaorb Aquamarine too. It feels like I can rush a lot easier in this deck, and because most of my zones are not filled up by front triggers anymore, I can just spam in a little bit more draws, because you don't really need to spam fronts now, since you're not going to be on regular Hexaorb most of the time. So again, having the 10k shield is pretty nice, having to be able to increase our hand with draw triggers is pretty nice for fronts too. So 2-0, we don't need too many of them, but 2 is just nice. Then we have 2 crits in White Fang Witch Disma, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power. Just a normal crit. We can use it to increase our criticals and add power to units for pressure. Then we have 3 more crits and Blade Feather Dragon, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k base, critical trigger, auto react, then about to boost it, put it to solo, choose units, 50k for the turn. If you are going on the all-out rush and you are going to bully the fuck out of your opponent, you're going to want this, because you're going to need a lot of soul for that bullshit play, and this is how you get it. If you're wondering why this is not a 4 of, it's because I hate running cards at 1 ofs, so instead of running this at a 4 of and this at a 1 of, I put this at 2 and 3. Am I an idiot for doing that? Maybe. Do I care? No. So we run a total of 5 crits, 2 draws. We have 4 fronts and Bard of Heavenly Song Outpack, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k base, continuous guard stroke. If your opponent's Grand Guards are grade 3 guards plus 5k shield. You know, on regular Hexa, it's plus 10 to front row and then 10k to any one unit. With new Hexa, it is plus 20 to front row, which is great, plus a Persona ride, because you have to get a Persona ride for that. That's a total plus 30 to front row. All around, Outpack is solid. Basically makes so the second you drive check this, your opponent's probably dropping most of their hand and or just 2 PGs to survive this turn. Outpack is solid grade 0. I love it. I think it's a cool front trigger, and she is always there when I want her to be, whether it's in this deck or any other Keter deck. Easy 4 for me. And then we have our last trigger, and it's 4 copies of Circling Sorceress. Grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 5k power, standard heal, no special about it. If you don't know why I don't run the effectives, because I just feel like they're too situational. Them being 10k shields most of the time, and only being 25k shields in very specific situations. It's kind of 50-50 to me, and I don't really like them. If you want to run the effectives in your deck, go ahead, but I prefer to run the normal heals for me, so it's all about personal taste at that point. 4 of our heals, though. Then move on to our grade 1s. First, we run 3 copies of this grade 1, who in my previous deck did fucking nothing, and the second I teched an Aquamarine has now become the most spam-worthy grade 1 I have in this deck. Recurring Magic Larita. I swear, I used to never see her, or if I did, she'd be PG fodder. Now, I not only see her 10 times more often, to the point where I'm playing her every game, but I actually don't want to ditch her for PG fodder unless I have no other choice, and even then I think I'd rather lose than ditch her. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto rearguard. At the end of the battle, your draft a trigger unit. If your Vanguard is Hexaorb Sorceress, yes, technically it has to be the original, but the new one does allow its name to be counted as the original, so it gets around that. By Crown Blasting 1 and Soul Blasting 1, choose one of your other rearguards, stand it, and retire this unit. So, not only do you get the ability to attack an extra time, and if you're on Aquamarine, then you just get 2 from a restands, granted for the cost of 2 CB and a counterblast, but you also can probably have given that trigger to the unit that you restood since it's no longer having a booster. This grade 1 is so solid, and again, at the end battle, your drive check, if you proc off the over, it will count towards rear guards, but all around, this thing is a solid grade 1, or the multi-texture lets me do add so much pressure to Hexa. Again, I say I like how 1 to 2 cards suddenly add, and this is not the card I added outside of Hexa, there was another card, but I like how 1 to 2 cards made the deck go from like barely putting pressure, or at least when I get to play it, to, oh yeah, there's pressure now, you didn't feel it before, but now there's pressure. 3 of Larita. Just a solid grade 1 who does the restand job good, and I can't argue that. Then we have 3 copies of Diaglass Sorceress. She has always been one of my favorite Hexaorb support cards, and now, even though I don't see her as often as I used to, I think she and Lara over here switched, because I used to see her so often, and now I don't, and I used to not see this thing very often, and now I do. But, anyways, grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base, auto when she's placed on rearguard from your hand. If your Vanguard is either Hexaorb Sorceress, or again, Aquamarine, or Pentagloom Sorceress, Crown Blast 1 and drop 1, look at the top 2, choose up to 2 unit cards from them, call into rearguard circle, and put the rest on the top deck in order. Pretty solid, as you can choose not to call anything, and most likely you will, and if you don't, then fair enough, you get to stack double triggers most likely, or you get to call 2 rear guards. I love that about Diaglass because on occasions I do have problems making a board, and that's why I kind of hate not being able to see her as often now, because I do want to make boards. But hey, you know what she does in return? She actually makes me boards. If I get to draw into her, she has consistently made me boards that I want to have. 3 of Diaglass. She's a solid grade 1. I've liked her since she's been released, and she has been putting in the good work whenever I get to use her, so easy 3 for me. Then we have 4 PGs and Aegismire Dragon, grade 1 boost 0 so 6k base, continue sentinel, you have up to 4 cells in deck, and also put in guard circle. Choose from your units, it cannot be hit on the battle, and if your hand is short more cards, choose a card from your hand, discard it. Standard PG, now spots battle basically means if this and only cards in here, place it on guard circle, you don't have to discard one, which is great, because that means you can be as aggressive as you want in the early game and rush your opponent, and when you're going to beat the shit out of them in the late game, that is totally worth it, and then when they survive, and then they counterattack you, and you have only 2 hand cards, as one of them, you can be like, bitch, not so fast, pretty boy. Throw down the PG. Sorry, let me get that in the right voice. Not so fast, pretty boy. You throw down the PG, and then boom, you're safe. And then as your opponent gives you the middle finger for doing that, you boombox Chaos Whisper, and then just middle finger them right back. Anyways, 4 of Aegismire. Solid PG, you can run Paladinium Zeal if you want, because they both have the same skill, but because Hexaorb came out with Aegismire, might as well run Aegismire with Hexaorb, just out of respect. So, easy 4-off, Sentinels definitely help keep the deck alive, especially when you do want to go out all in on the offense as early as physically possible. I mean, if you have a Diaglass, wait till you get to grade 2 and then pull it off, but yeah, still solid. Then we have our last grade 1, and it's the grade 1 of the ride deck, none in the main deck sadly, though I am tempted to sometimes put her in the main deck, and that is Tier Square Sorceress. I'm going to be honest with you, if this didn't work out, I was actually tempted to check this out for 3 more copies of this in the main deck. Her skill has been putting in work in my Grifogila deck. Anyways, her skill that you only be able to use in this game, because you know you can't call her out from soul, is auto when she's rolled upon by Pentagloom Sorceress, current boss want to draw a card. So, if you ever give me 2 damage, you're probably opening up the floodgates, because a lot of times I will draw this into my opening hand, and therefore I can't use it because my opponent will only do me 1 damage, and I have to just pick the draw over this one. But yeah, if you ever give me 2 damage, expect this to come down, and I will fucking abuse you with it. Either way, though, being able to counterboss one and draw a card isn't bad. It's like Circle Magus from before, except worse because it's specifically restricted to a specific grade 2. But then her other skill, which is pretty solid, and again, I would have ran her in the main deck if Lala Rita didn't work as well as she did now, and that is auto rearguard once per turn. When your drive check reveals a trigger unit, again, it can be a rearguard drive check thanks to Armor Tinoa. By counter blasting 1, you can choose one of your opponent's farm rearguards and put it to the bottom of their deck. All around, pretty solid. Bot decking things is amazing. I know it by playing Grifogila, that deck is so fucking good at being defensive and offensive at the same time. And just getting rid of your opponent's rearguards as you continuously beat the shit out of them is just great. and it only costs counterbots, which none of the grade 3s do, or technically one of them does, but you'll never be able to proc off that ability, so it doesn't really matter. Either way, it's a solid grade 1. If you want to run her more copies in the main deck, run her over Diaglass. I don't want you to. You are dead to me if you do, but I can argue reasons why. If I have to pick between these two, I will say Lalorita does more, just because I don't see Diaglass as much. But again, I say Diaglass, love, Slay Queen. I'm doing like the hand motion when you say that. If you get rid of her, you are dead to me. One of take square in the ride deck. Then move on to our grade 2s. 4 copies of, again, another card that used to be useless to me and I was actually being useful, and I'm glad I never ditched her. Quadra-Cast Sorceress. Grade 2 NSF 5k shield, 10k base. Auto she's placed on rear guard if your Vanguard's a Sorceress. So technically you can proc it off while you're on tier square. I don't know how you're going to call it when you're on tier square, but you can if you would. You can proc it off while you're on Pentagleam or any of the 2 Hexas. If your Vanguard has Sorceress card name, look at the top 2. Choose, put them at the top deck on your order, and then soul charge 1. So, being able to stack top 2, half the time she either gives me 2 no triggers or she gives me 2 triggers. Actually, no, yeah, that is half the time. Half the time it's either 2 triggers, and then the other half the time it's 2 normal units. So there's no real winning with her, but she gets you soul, and therefore more ways to board restand with Hexa, because it is possible to board restand a Hexa. I've tried to pull it off. Have I succeeded? No. You want to know why? Because the game ends right before I can do it. Yep. The game just ends right before I can do it because no one can handle Hexaorb's aggressive power. Don't go look at the 2 games that Hexa lost on my channel. We don't count those. Those are pity games, quote unquote. You can't see them, but I'm doing quotation marks with my hands. Anyways, for Quadra-Cast, she's just good. She does get you deck stacking for free. I do hate the fact that her mandatory soul charge kind of makes me soul charge triggers half the time. But again, I say that's how it works, and she does end up helping Aquamarine be more aggressive. So there's no reason for me not to run her at a 4 because she does everything she does for free. Then we have 4 copies of another card that is amazing at 4 of, and that is Yearnful Magic Asuno. Grade 2 NSF 5k shield, 10k base, auto rear guard once per turn when she attacks into anything. If your Vanguard is a Hexaorb Sorceress, or a Pentagleam Sorceress, or Aquamarine Sorceress, discard 1, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose up to 2 cards from among them, put them at the top of your deck in any order, and put the rest on the bottom deck in any order, and this equals 10k for the turn. All around, solid, because the 10k skill, regardless of where you put them, is guaranteed. Like, half the time when I do that, I give it the 10k first, because it doesn't matter how I stack them. But then, great, you can either choose to stack the top 2, or send both to bottom, because maybe they're not triggers, or stack the top 1 and send the other to bottom, or just send all of them to bottom. Either way, she's just great. She's amazing. The only thing I hate about her is her being a discard, because half the time when I have to use her ability, the first time I use it, I have to discard something I want to keep, which sucks for me, but that's just how it works, and that is a sacrifice I'm willing to make for a top 2 stack. Either way, she's amazing, and half the time in this deck I've stacked the over from it, so great. She's a good card for just stacked an easy 20k base, and she can do this while you're at grade 2, and while your opponent's at grade 1, because she works on Pentagleam. Then we have 4 copies of our newest grade 2, and that is Influgent Wizard. Grade 2 NSF 5k shield, 10k base. I gotta admit, I do love looking at him. Yellow is one of my favorite colors, and he just looks like a lemon shooting at you with a wand. Auto rear guard, when this unit attack, if your Vanguard's a Sorceress, it has it in its card name. So again, Pentagleam, Tier Square, Tri-Square, Hexaorbs, etc. Look at the top card of your deck. If your Vanguard is standing, you may put that card that you looked at into Soul. So first up is not a mandatory send to Soul, so you don't have to Soul Charge if you don't want to if it's a trigger. But guaranteedly, as long as your Vanguard is a Sorceress, it's a look at top card. Now, if the Vanguard's rested, it goes back to top anyways. But cool that it gets a free stack, or not free stack, but a free look into the future. And then auto rear guard, when your drive check was a trigger unit, it gets plus 5k power ton of turn. Again, works with rear guard drive checks. Combine this with Aquamarine to send the top card to Soul if it's not a trigger, and keep it there if it is a trigger. Stand this unit, get plus total 15, maybe even 25 if you're on a Persona Ride turn. All around, solid grade 2. It's amazing. I have no reason not to like this thing. I think it's great. 4 of. It's just perfect the way it is in my opinion. Then we move on to our last grade 2, and the grade 2 we talked about a lot at this point. That is one of in the ride deck, none in the main deck, of Pentagleam Sorceress. Grade 2 NSF 5k shield, 10k base. Auto when she's run upon by Hexaorb Sorceress, look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Put them at the top of your deck in any order. So you can't really stack them to the bottom, but you can just stack the top 3, which is great. Half the time I use that, I see heals and crits. So free advantage for me. And then the other skill is auto when it's placed on rear guard from anywhere. Look at the top card of your deck and put it to top or bottom. If you put it at the bottom, she gets plus 2k for the turn. I don't know why they couldn't give her fucking 3k from that. That just feels so stupid to me. But cool. 12k base, does nothing in terms of rushing grade 3s, but cool. And, being able to stack the top card to top or bottom is not bad either. You can't call from soul in this deck. You can't call from drop in this deck. If you wanted to run her in the main deck because she's a free deck stack, and maybe you too hate Quadracast because she makes you lose fucking triggers, then, or maybe you just don't like Earful because she forces you to drop a card, then go ahead and run her over one of them. But I would not suggest it because those two actually do their job in terms of stacking for soul and then stacking in general and getting numbers out of it. One of for me and Pentagleam in the ride deck. If you want to run more of her in the main deck, go ahead. But in my opinion, she serves better as just a ride deck card. Move on to our grade 3s. For the first time in forever, I'm not going to go singing the song because I will get copyrighted by Frozen. I get copyrighted for my outro. Frozen will definitely copyright me for even trying that shit. Hell, I might be copyrighted for that alone. We have our ride deck grade 3 first, and that is one copy in the ride deck, none in the main deck of the original Hexaorb Sorceress. Grade 3 Champion Persona, 13k base, auto Vanguard. When your drive check reveals a trigger unit, choose one of your rear guards, it gets plus 10k for the turn. That is why she's in the ride deck. You will never be able to pull off the second ability because, again, there's no way to add stuff from soul back to hand or from drop to soul or from drop to hand. But, yeah, that's why. Because the other Hexaorb, while yes, she can get multi-attack while you're on first grade 3 turn, she doesn't add numbers to triggers. And I value the trigger numbers more than I value that. Also because if you're going on for multi-attack longer, you're going to run into resource problems later, like quicker. So I'd rather have the less attacks first grade 3 turn, but more consistency and more setup than having to go all out from the get-go. But you can if you need to. And then her other ability, which you're never going to proc off in this deck, that's impossible, but if you found a way to do it, then here you go. Active Vanguard once per turn. If you Persona this turn, Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, reveal up to 1 critical or 1 front trigger from your hand, put it at the top of the deck, and then it gets plus 1 drive ton of turn. All around, it's a pretty solid skill, being able to have triple drive and then almost get a guaranteed trigger on top, and then being able to give plus 10 from that trigger's normal effect, and then another plus 10 from the Vanguard's effect is pretty great. It's kind of weird that it's restricted to crits and fronts and you don't throw draws into it. I mean, heals, I can see reason why you wouldn't throw that in there, but still. But then also the fact that it gets the drive regardless if you put something at top or not is pretty great as well. So all around, it's not a bad skill, but the reason why it's not being ran in the main deck is because Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blast 1 was kind of the issue that I was having with Hexaorb, where if I wanted to Persona Ride, I'd basically be so cautious of my cost that I would rarely use skills, and that would kind of cost me the game. So I sadly just don't use her skill, and therefore why I don't run her in the main deck. But if you want to run her in the main deck, you can run her as a one-of tech maybe, or even swap out how your ride line works. But I prefer to have this Hexaorb in the ride deck because her ability, the 10k ability, it procs off when you're first grade 3 turns. So one of Hexaorb in the ride deck. Then we move on to our grade 3s that are not in the ride deck. 2 copies of Octa Devote Sorceress, grade 3 Champion Persona, 13k base, auto rearguard. When your draft check reveals a trigger unit, if your Vanguard is Hexaorb Sorceress, or if you retire this unit and either countercharge 1 or soul charge 1. All around is not bad. I wish it did both, but this was back in set 2 when we were only allowed to have 1 plus at a time, so fair enough. But, being able to countercharge or soul charge isn't that bad because typically Hexaorb tends to, especially this version of it, tends to have one problem over the other, except unlike before where it was both problems at the same time. So, thankfully, it's not as hefty as it is now. It's most of the time just a soul problem, but on occasions it's a counterblast problem too. So being able to use Octavote to fix that is pretty nice, and not to mention the fact that she allows it to happen with any trigger in your drive check. Again, not just specifically the Vanguard, but the rear guards 1 too. So all around, solid grade 3. I like her skill a lot. She's decent. 2 of. Then we have 2 copies of Twinned Great Magic Tonte. So grade 3 Trend Persona Ride, 13k base. Auto rear guard. At the end of the battle, your unit attacked, and this is the great thing I was talking about before, where, I mean, granted this one works too, but like at the end of the battle, any unit attacked, counterboss 1, perform all the following effects, but below according to the drive check, trigger units revealed for your drive check of that battle. So again, it can be rear guard attacks as long as they pulled the over from it, or maybe not even pulled the over, just have rear guard drive check for whatever reason. It'll still proc off the effect. Critical trigger, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and put it to bottom. Front trigger, choose an opponent's grade 2 or less rear guard and choose one of your grade 2 or less units and stand it. So all around, solid. If you get a crit, you can send stuff back, and I believe it's only like 1 per drive check. So I think even if you sack double crits, you only send 1 unit back, but someone correct me if I'm wrong. But still being able to send rear guards to bottom is amazing, and not to mention the fact, and it sends any rear guard, not just front row, not just unit opposing this, just any unit on your opponent's board, send it to bottom. And then, being able to stand a grade 2 less rear guard definitely helps out with Hexaorb's skill, with the new one being able to restand other rear guards, because even though this can't stand itself, you can use new Hexaorb to stand her. So all around pretty solid. I love Totohone a lot. She's an amazing grade 3, has a solid skill, 2 of, especially because I see her often enough as this, so I don't need to run her more than 2 of. And then speaking of Aquamarine Sorceress, the big card of the day and the last card of the day, 4 copies, none in the main deck, sorry, all in the main deck, none in the ride deck, of Hexaorb Sorceress Aquamarine. So grade 3, Tundra Persona, 13k base, this beautiful looking card. I was trying to go on a bit and I completely forgot it. It has 3 different abilities. First up, Continuous Vanguard. This unit is also regarded as a Hexaorb Sorceress. So, all around, solid. I like that ability because, again, if you ride it from ride deck, it'll be counted as a Hexaorb, so it will proc off things like Pentagleam or Esuno or where's the other one that name required it? These 2, like pretty much anything that name requires Hexaorb, you can proc off, or yeah, this one too. You can proc off this one. And if you wanted to, it works for Persona Ride, so you can Persona Ride this on top of this and vice versa. So if you wanted to put this in the main deck instead and this into the ride deck, you could, and it would still work that way. But the reason why I put this one in the main deck is because of this skill. Continuous Vanguard. If you Persona Ride this turn, this unit gets +1 drive, and the power increase of your trigger effects get +10. So yes, it gets the drive for free, which is great. My issues with it, though, are, and it's not the fact that it doesn't stack. I'm fine with that not stacking, because everything else in the deck stacks. My issue with it is the fact that the trigger +10, it's not +10 to any unit like Hexa is, it's +10 to the trigger. So if you get a crit, the crit itself gives +20 to a unit, and you can't just give like 10 to one rear guard and then 10 to another. Or if like you see a front, everyone gets +20, which I guess is better than like +10 to front row and then +10 to an extra unit, but you get the point. It's still a good skill, but the fact that it's restricted to Persona Ride makes me not want to use it as the main grade 3, or at least the one in the ride deck. And the other skills, Auto Vanguard. When your drive check is when a trigger unit is revealed in your drive check of the battle this unit attacked, so you cannot bullshit this with the over, sadly. But again, this thing exists, so take that as you will. Soul Blast 1, choose one of your rear guards, stand it. Cool. Again, I say, you see one trigger if it's a front, use her skill to stand a grade 2 rear guard, use the Vanguard skill to stand this thing, and since not once per turn, technically speaking, if you keep stacking triggers, you can just keep standing. So, all around, it's pretty solid. I think her skill is great. She allows for multi-attack, and that ability is not restricted to anything, so if you wanted to put her in the ride deck, you could technically do that on first grade 3 turn if you had enough triggers to sack, which is why I did consider putting her in the ride deck. But again, it became between, like, the power, and I'd rather have, like, you know, power over this, because this also costs resources, so I'd rather save my resources for, like, final turn moves, and then, like, just bully the opponent with temporary power, because consistently I've pulled off a Persona at every game with this deck, so except for one game where I was forced to drop it, but I've drawn it every game. That's the important part. So 4 of Aquamarine, solid grade 3. I like her skill. Multi-attack, adds numbers, still gets triple drive, and she allows for the entire deck to proc off, which is what I have hoped for Eugene's evolution, because let's be fair, we all know we're getting one at some point, because yeah, that was actually a really good way to get around the naming conventions. I think that's what a lot of us thought they're going to do with like the grade 4s, like they would give them away to be regarded as the other unit, and they didn't, but hey, they brought it back eventually. And that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed. Okay, first up, this background looks fucking beautiful. That is just the Aquamarine Sorceress like art blown up all the way, if you couldn't tell. But yeah, no, that genuinely looks beautiful. I love the skyline on that one. But either way, that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. All around, this deck is fun and interesting. I used to not like Hexa very much and only played it because I felt like I had to for the sake of YouTube. But you know what? Now I'm actually kind of enjoying it. I love Aquamarine's ability to restand. I love how I can swap between 2 different hexes, and I can choose to stay on this one if I want to or if I need to, because maybe I was forced to drop it thanks to PGs. And this deck can do a fuck ton of stacking, and we have a cool new grade 2 that I just honestly like the look of. So without further ado, I'm going to end it here. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join Discord, follow Twitch, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to send up your Vanguards.